Today's video is going to be kind of doubled up because we also have some Detroit Lions news as the time of me kind of going through and doing some of the editing process. And that is that the Detroit Lions are going to be signing linebacker Grant Stuard on a 1-year fully guaranteed deal. Now, I didn't actually see the contract details of how high that price would be. I don't expect it to be super high for Grant Stuard, but he is signing a 1-year deal with the Detroit Lions. The undersized linebacker, former Mr. Irrelevant back in 2021, to a 1-year deal from the Indianapolis Colts, who played a majority of his snaps this past season. So let's get right into it. So Grant Stuard played over 250 snaps this past year, and the only real game that I had dove into so far of Grant Stuard was the game against us, where he played over 20 snaps as a true will linebacker that typically worked outside of the box. You didn't see him press inside the tackles very often, which makes sense due to his skill set. And that was really the problem coming out of the draft as well. He's very undersized, doesn't carry a lot of length, not a super fluid athlete, which I think gives him some problems as a true blitzer, but also truly in coverage as well, and some of the flexibility there. He also isn't much of a strider. It's much more short area footwork, so I think longer developing routes lead to some problems. And as aggressive, high energy, attacking as he is, he's like a ball of fire as a player. There's the flip side where it doesn't feel like everything's as instinctual or as fluid in terms of working from one thing to the next. That can get him to some trouble, and I think it can also lead to some lack of playmaking. He did, however, this past season not miss many tackles. He was a very good tackler, and he's always had kind of that quick twitch closing ability. It's just that some of his range has felt a little bit limited, especially when he has to work through blocks. One thing that really intrigues me, and I'm not saying that this is going to be the case with Grant Stuard, and I'm very pumped to do a full breakdown on this player a little bit later because I think the ability here to potentially move around is super intriguing. Of course, he has a special teams background. He played over 1,200 snaps on special teams, and I anticipate that's going to carry over immediately for the Lions because of the physicality that he brings to the game. The thing that intrigues me the most is the potential to play fullback. I do wonder a little bit if there is some fullback potentially in his future. I've said for weeks that I feel like fullback is going to be part of this team going forward. I'm not saying this has to happen. He definitely has the build of a guy like David Long or Quan Alexander, even closer to a Malcolm Rodriguez, though I don't think he brings that kind of stack and shed ability from what I had seen so far anywhere near that, but he does bring that kind of size that can fit into our linebacker room, no question, as a true will linebacker. But I do just wonder a little bit if there is some potential fullback upside to his game where the Lions, if they wanted to try to utilize him on that side of the ball, may give it a swing. Now, him playing a majority of the snaps this past year defensively at 230 of his career, that would make sense to leave him in that spot because it felt like they found a role that he was pretty successful in and let him live outside the box, which allowed him to deal with a lot less traffic for offensive linemen, which meant that less stack and shed opportunities were necessary, which I think led to a lot more success. He definitely has that attacking ability where he has a quick diagnose, work through the offensive line, kind of navigate traffic really well, and play incredibly fast when working downhill. So you put him out in space, he has a really quick trigger downhill. He's incredibly decisive, which really cranks up his play speed. It leads to some discipline issues. You'll see it on play action where he kind of feels like he's flying all over out of the play. Everything feels a little bit disjointed, I think, at times too, when you have him working through layered concepts. But he also plays with that quick twitch, short area ability, which can open up some of the zone cover drops underneath, specifically where you can kind of be play between two guys. He can close in a hurry, where if he can kind of work on top of routes, flats, things in space that are kind of within 5 yards, he has that closing speed, which really starts to show up. And you can see his downhill play speed like this. And this is where he can quickly kind of recognize just things flashing in front of his face. Here he's going to jump into the C gap to fill his gap, but then you notice the counter pull setup. He sees the lineman kick out, and immediately he starts to redirect that direction. Now, he's already in the backfield, so he helps make the stop here, but that's his aggressive game. Nature where he can attack outside of an offensive tackle, or he can step inside of a tackle as a blitzer, or just shooting gaps upfield with kind of that eagerness to his game, which allows him to fill in but also attack. And he plays with a very square entry. He will attack tight ends. I just don't think the stack and shed ability is super high in terms of upside, and also in terms of some of the range there due to some of the lack of length. Tightness in this game can also show up, I think, as a blitzer, which has limited some of the upside, though I haven't seen him there, in fairness, a ton either. So I think Grant Stuard is absolutely going to bring immediate special teams value for the Lions here. He does have the build to play will backer, and if you can keep him clean, you could understand why, based on what we had last season, you could see the potential fit here for him to find some snaps defensively from what I had seen so far. But I would just say keep an eye on the potential for him giving some offensive snaps. I have no insight to that whatsoever. He just feels like a guy that, with his ball of energy that he plays with, that does a really nice job of kind of squaring up at the point of attack, is fearless of contact, and also has some short area athleticism, but less as a strider that can change directions on a dime. That feels like something that could be very translatable. We got an unfortunate update right after Levi Onwuzurike re-signed with the Detroit Lions, and that is that the Detroit Lions are losing Kevin Zeitler to the Tennessee Titans for a 1-year, $9 million deal. The Detroit Lions are losing Kevin Zeitler. He will not be returning for one more season as he's going to Tennessee. And obviously, I don't know why he chose to go to Tennessee. Did they just simply outprice us? Potentially, but I'd be a little bit surprised. It's definitely a raise from last year's just over $6 million to get to $9 million. But I truly believe that if he said, "Hey, Lions, I want $9 million for a season," that the Lions would be like, "Yep, that's cool. We'll pay you. We'll bring you back." And I am comfortable with what the Lions have on their offensive line. When we re-signed Graham Glasgow to that 3-year deal, as there were some up and downs. I mean, of course, that happened in the playoff game. He's never been a great pass protector for Graham Glasgow, but I still like him as a run blocker, even if that took a little bit of a step back this past season. We like his athleticism. That guy was initially signed to be our starting guard. And then we, of course, landed Kevin Zeitler, and it was going to be him and Zeitler. It just so happened that when Mahogany played, he looked good. And now you feel like, okay, well, maybe you do have your starting five, but it would be nice to address it. We're seeing what other teams are doing in the North. It'd be nice to address adding another offensive guard, specifically a pass protector, if that was going to be what we do in free agency, maybe a little bit more on the aggressive side. That way we know it's an upgrade from Graham Glasgow. And that's where I'm personally at with it, that if we're going to do it, I either want it to be a clear-cut upgrade, like, hey, we're paying for this guy, even if it's a short-term deal, it's an older guard, and there's some options right now that we could do that, rather than like, maybe he's better, but we're not really sure than Graham. It's kind of a competition. Don't do that with your money. At that point, just go for a true backup that maybe could play multiple spots on the inside if you're going to do it. Now, I do think that this definitely going to have a lot to do with where Kevin Zeitler wants to retire, the offensive line coach that he's playing with. I don't need to say anything against Hank Fraley, but it could have been a lot of different things more so than just money. I don't think it was just money here. However, two options that I am interested in, and initially I wasn't that high on this, but I think they fit into the category really well. And I also believe the Lions were very prepared for this. I mean, you're prepared for all scenarios. You have reports on all these guys that are available, but I do believe that they were probably pretty prepared for losing Kevin Zeitler. And I say that because they have those end of the year discussions. And Brad Holmes at the time told us that spoke to Kevin Zeitler, and that's kind of in his court from what we were able to gather from that is it was going to be the ball is in his court. So I got to believe the Lions were pretty aware that they were probably going to lose Kevin Zeitler now that we know they are losing Kevin Zeitler. And I think that they have a plan for this. I think the Lions are going to have a comfortable plan. And two guys that I think are super interesting on the free agency market that could definitely plug in, and I think you could make a case are true upgrades, are Will Hernandez from the Arizona Cardinals, who Dan Campbell did say that he was watching film against the Cardinals, and when we played the Cardinals in week 3, and also Brad Holmes told us that watching our defense against the Cardinals, they looked great. One thing that I have noticed is that if you watch a lot of these interior offensive linemen, they don't look as great against the Lions because that's how good Lee McNeil and DJ Reader was. It kind of hyped me up watching other offensive linemen play against us. It's like, man, we were pretty darn good. We gave these guys some fits, and now they're like pretty big names on the market. The point is that Will Hernandez from Arizona at 29 years old, that's played right guard, only played 280 snaps this past year, played 1,000 a year before. He's a player that you could make the case is an upgrade from Graham Glasgow. And of course, Glasgow has flexibility to play everywhere. So even if you signed a guard, it doesn't mean that Glasgow can't play. He could win the job over Mahogany. And then of course, at worst case, he could play backup center or backup guard for us, but that we have for a couple more years under contract that also has out really after the season. There's a thick build there with Will Hernandez, the body type that he brings. It's an active footwork within the control. You'll see that as a pass protector. He has that anchor footwork that he can get to specifically, showcases some of that short area of foot quickness, which is adequate in some of the redirect and movement skills. Good force in terms of the ability to drive block specifically as a run blocker. He's got some stoutness that would show off also as well in terms of the anchor that he could create. And he showcased the control that really stood out across the board for me as a movement piece, as a puller that showed some diversity as a run blocker specifically. Now, I had some knocks. He definitely didn't look as quick off the ball, as quick in the pass sets as Kevin Zeitler did, or even as a run blocker either for me. I didn't feel as much juice there as a mover, as a run blocker specifically. His footwork felt a little bit heavier to me. The control was good, but the redirect footwork felt a little bit heavier. Felt like he would give up an edge a little bit more often. Quickly settle into blocks was a little bit more consistent, but I like the angles that he took. I think scheme-wise, he may be a little bit more limited in like wide zone scheme, but there's enough flexibility for more inside zone stuff and definitely gap scheme. And the other option is Brandon Sheriff. And this is one I didn't expect to be that interested in, but I kind of am now. At 33 years old, he was also coming off right guard, played over 1,000 snaps this past year for Jacksonville. And I think I can make even a stronger case that this is definitely an upgrade from Graham Glasgow, especially if it's a one-year deal, which is very possible, at a 98.6% efficiency rating in pass protection in terms of pressures allowed for multiple reasons. Number one, there's an acceleration when he gets out to the second level. He has some juice that he can get to kind of track guys into second level. I think he plays with a firm base, with a lower pad level in pass protection specifically that shows up. And then run blocking wise, I think there's a lot of burst flexibility. within his game. I think there's quickness for zone scheme on the front side. He has kind of the entry awareness to kind of reset himself and be able to kind of seal off blocks to set up to next level. Problem there is that he can get locked out, kind of get punched back. We saw Mekhi Wingo have a great Reds against him, but then he also has a flexibility for a pulling scheme to move, show control as a player, play with really good entry angles into contact, and even wide zone scheme. He's capable with the movement skills to do that as well, with a better first step than what I had seen with Will Hernandez, which reminded me a little bit of Zeitler, not only into his pass sets, but specifically as a run blocker, his good off the ball. I still had Knox here for sure. Some of the redirect ability, the stunt pickups, kind of the instinctual feel to kind of redirect for stunts. I didn't think there was a consistent latch to his game. It felt like as reps would go on, the anchor would start to kind of give up an edge, which was a little bit of a problem as well. Staying movement to the second level as well as he could get there, just sustaining guys, latching guys felt more inconsistent as well. But these are two options that I think could definitely be interesting to the Lions, and I do believe that they're going to have a plan. I don't think they have to do this, but these are two guys that watching through today, just different free agent options, caught my eye, and I thought, this could make sense. This could make a lot of sense. So I wish we would have had Kevin Zeitler back, but there's going to be a plan. Wishing Kevin Zeitler the best. Appreciate the 1 year because it was a great year. But I'm going to leave it here. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'm out.